In fall of 2011, I had just finished my first semester of college. It was a really busy semester as an education major, and I had always wanted to be a teacher. I was working full-time and taking a boatload of courses, and I was trying to get through this rough patch in my 3.5-year relationship. Granted, my whole relationship of 3.5 years was pretty rough, so most people might just say it was a rough relationship. However, had you asked me that at the time, I would have strictly told you otherwise. I was so focused on trying to ignore these things about the relationship that completely tore me apart inside. The lies, the cheating, the excessive verbal and mental abuse, these things were my normal. However, the toxic state of the relationship was apparent, even to me at times. We would try and talk about something that had happened, or something that was bothering me that day, and it would always result in this vicious cycle of anger and frustration and resentment, and there were never any results. So I learned that the only thing I could really do was to ignore this cycle. So I did. But finally, the relationship got the best of me. It chewed me up, and boy, did it spit me out. My moment of realization was not by any means glorious or instantaneous. It was a very slow process of unlearning everything I had taught myself about relationships and about who I thought I was. And finally, when I had unlearned just enough to know that I needed to let go, I did. But the following weeks were really difficult for me. And I often found myself gravitating towards the lakefront, looking for some type of peace or solace that I could find in myself. In fact, there's an author by the name of Florence Williams who actually seeks to describe this connection between humans and our natural environment. Williams wore an EEG monitor out on a morning kayak session one day on the water to monitor her brainwaves and see what was happening. Results from this EEG monitor showed that her brain had actually produced something we call alpha waves. Now, alpha waves are typically produced during a period of awake relaxation, such as during a meditation session, when you're calm and focused, but your eyes are closed. So that means that Williams's brain was able to produce that same type of alpha wave high that she could have gotten from a morning meditation session by simply going out and interacting with the water. Now, this same feeling of relaxed awareness came over me on my trips to the lakefront. Arriving at the lake was the place that I could take all of my problems and everything that was bothering me that day or eating away at me, and I could simply drown it out. The lake was there, wide and open and ready to receive everything I had to say without any judgment. Arriving at the lakefront was like arriving into the arms of a good friend for a warm hug when you haven't seen them in years. Now, one day, after my usual peaceful state of nirvana on the lakefront, I decided to go to my favorite local cafe because there was this gigantic thunderstorm that was coming in, and I wanted to watch it. So I drove to the cafe, and I got out, parked my car, and I went inside and ordered my coffee. And I took it outside just as the wind had started picking up and these clouds were billowing on top of each other. And I sat down just as it started raining and took my first sip, ready to watch the show. And suddenly, I heard someone call my name. So I took my sip, and I put my cup down, and I turned around. And my boyfriend was standing there, and he was staring at me. And he opened his mouth to begin speaking, but I suddenly realized that I couldn't hear a single word that he was saying because the thunder had started crashing and the lightning, it was flashing, and the rain, it was pouring down around us. And it was in that moment that rain held me and that water cleansed me of this toxic relationship that I had been in. And as he walked away, I finally understood why I had been going to the lakefront for days and weeks on end. I had developed a friendship with water. Now, the following weeks were monumental for me. I changed my degree to conservation and environmental science because I had to find a career where I would have the opportunity to further explore this connection between humans and this precious resource that we have. The next couple semesters, you could find me managing native prairie or invasive species in Wisconsin. And my final semester, I accepted my first big girl job at Hanging Gardens, a company specializing in green infrastructure for stormwater management in the Milwaukee area. Now, water is this relationship that I will never be able to leave. It is, in fact, a relationship that every human on the face of the earth has from the moment that they're conceived. Humans are over 60% water, and the average American uses 80 to 100 gallons of water every single day. We are water, and we need water. My career was now taking me further into this relationship with water that not only I had, but everyone in the Milwaukee community has, and in fact, everyone in every community across the globe has. So let's stop right there. Let's look at this through a relationship perspective. We know that we have a relationship with water, but what is it currently? And more specifically, how do we identify in this relationship? We're constantly using water, not only through consuming it, but through our everyday interactions with industry and commerce and trade. Water is a core component to literally everything that we do. Driving to the store, it took a ton of water to manufacture your vehicle. And going for a run, we're definitely going to need water after that. Cooking. Every ingredient in the dinner that you make required water to grow or to produce it and to get it to the store for you to buy. And getting dressed. It takes over 20,000 gallons of water to produce only enough cotton for a single t-shirt. And breathing. By the end of the day, everyone in this room will have just exhaled roughly 5.1 ounces of water just by breathing. We identify as users and takers in this relationship with water. Now, what about how do we affect water? Humans are some of the most intelligent creatures on the face of the earth. Yet somehow, we have still not found a way to sustainably grow our cities and our communities with this precious resource in mind. Take, for example, Hurricane Irma a couple weeks ago. Florida dumped millions and millions of gallons of poorly treated or untreated stormwater into their bays and their canals. And why? They just had too much water. In fact, the Environmental Protection Agency temporarily pardoned rules and regulations that we ourselves have set in place to keep this resource safe. And why? Simply because we had too much water in a space that we had not designed to manage that much water. We disregard water in this relationship. So let's stop right there and let's turn the tables. We've looked at ourselves. So what about water? How does water identify in our relationship? Water is a provider. In fact, in biology, we might even say that humans and water have a parasitic relationship. Water, the host, and humans, the parasite. Humans are constantly taking and taking and taking from this resource, and most of the time as we do it without thinking what kind of effect it's having on water. What about how does water affect us? Water powers our body. It cleanses toxins from us, and it hydrates every single cell that you and I have. Without water, we will perish. Now, the relationship that I was in had taught me that there's a couple of red flags, if you will, in any relationship that we should look out for that may be an indicator that something about that relationship is not what we think it is. The first, giving to someone who only consumes. Water is constantly giving to us every single day, and we hungrily take more without thinking what our effects will be on it. The second, disrespect for the other. we blatantly disregard rules and regulations we ourselves have set in place to keep this resource safe. And why? Simply because it becomes too difficult for us at the time. And last, lack of accountability. I don't know about you, but I would hear about problems in other cities or countries with water, and I would think to myself, wow, I really hope someone solves this problem. Instead of, wow, I wonder what I can do to help solve this problem. Now, I think it's pretty safe to say that we're in a harmful relationship with water. But the thing is, we can't just leave. We can't just walk away and say, hey, water, I don't need you anymore. So how do we begin to go about repairing this relationship that we have? We're constantly interacting with water. But I challenge you to consider if you have ever truly recognized your responsibility as a person in this relationship. Most of us will turn on the faucet without even taking more than a millisecond to think about all of the resources that it took to get that water there for us in the first place. How much water did it take to make your breakfast this morning? Or how much water does it take to grow the garden that's in your backyard? Every person in this room today could make a significant change in their relationship with water starting right now, if we simply decide to acknowledge that we are indeed in a relationship with water. Now, the relationship that I had taught me that there were 3 fundamental characteristics to help begin curating new perspective in relationships that we have. And 3 fundamental characteristics that could ultimately help us learn how to change our behaviors for the betterment of the relationship. The first, be present. Notice all of your consumption habits. As we practice awareness of these things, we practice self-discipline, and self-discipline will foster change. The second, trust the process. You are not going to become the perfect, sustainable-minded consumer overnight. However, every time you use a water-efficient appliance or you decide to dispose of hazardous waste properly instead of just dumping it into the storm drain, you are making one small difference in your relationship with water that will add up immensely over the course of your lifetime. And last, never stop trying. You are not going to be able to solve all of the problems that the world has with water, and that's okay. But every time that you use biodegradable soap or you decide to help your local nonprofit clean up the riverbank, you are making a difference in your relationship with water for the better. If we simply be present, that's the big jump into the deep end. If we trust this process of unlearning and recreating ourselves in this relationship, we could drastically alter the current global outlook on water security. And if we never stop trying, we could change the future of water. Thank you.